Hi guys, hope everybody's doing well today. Today is going to be our marinara sauce day. So just like always, let's go ahead and go over our ingredients and the equipment that we're going to use today to make our marinara sauce. All right. So first thing you're going to need some tomato sauce. It's about 29 ounces of just canned tomato sauce. 1 can of diced tomatoes. This is about 15 ounces. I think it's like 14 and a half. This is the garlic and olive oil. They do sell a lot of different varieties of this. So you can get anything from like some spicy red peppers to basil and oregano and some other ones. All right, so it all depends on what kind of flavor you want to add to your sauce. Some minced garlic, olive oil, grated Parmesan cheese, some dried oregano leaves, 1 small white onion, about a ½ pound or 8 ounces of fresh mushrooms. And you want to go ahead and rinse these. When you get mushrooms, let's see, you can kind of see the black dots that are on there. That's some of the compost, because mushrooms grow in a compost. That's how they grow them. So a lot of times when they pick them, they'll get compost all over the mushrooms. So go ahead and give those a good rinse. Use your thumb or your hand to kind of wipe off any of the compost that's stuck to them. If you have a brush, they do sell mushroom cleaning brushes. It's just like a little round brush that you can use to wipe that stuff off while you're running it under cold water. All right, so go ahead and clean those. And 1 bunch of fresh basil. Okay, this you'll also want to rinse your basil. This one is fresh out of my herb box that I have outside. But regardless, if you get it from the store, I would still give it a good rinse. Okay. All right, let's take a look at our equipment. Gonna need some measuring spoons, dry measuring cups, just a couple of smaller bowls, right, that I like to use to put my diced onion, my cut mushrooms. You might even do 3 small bowls, one to put your basil in, okay, so that all that stuff is ready to go. A whisk, a sharp knife. I like to use my chef's knife. Spatula or something to turn your ingredients. And of course, a large skillet to do everything in, okay? This is my cast iron skillet. I like to use the cast iron. But any large, deep skillet will work, okay? So let's go ahead, get those ingredients, make sure that your mushrooms are clean and your basil is rinsed, and we will get started. All right, so I've gone ahead, I've cleaned my mushrooms, okay? So I have my mushrooms all cleaned up. I have my basil rinsed, okay? And we're gonna go ahead and get started with some of our prep. I went ahead and moved my olive oil, my minced garlic, if you're using it that's already prepared in the container, my oregano, let's see, what else? And my grated Parmesan cheese. You can go ahead and move over to your cooking area, okay? So that kind of gives you a little bit more space to work when you're preparing your other stuff, all right? So we're gonna go ahead and get started with preparing. So I'm gonna go ahead and tilt you down a little bit so you can see what's going on. All right, I'm gonna start off with my basil today. All right, so I have my bunch of basil here, and you wanna use the leaves, okay, of the basil. So I'm just gonna go through and I'm gonna pick off my leaves. Okay, and you wanna have about a tablespoon or so of basil. So I'm just going through and picking off all of my leaves. Make sure that you don't have any, ones that are brown or that an insect maybe started eating or anything like that. It does happen, especially when you're using fresh basil. So if so, just discard those leaves. All right, and then the rest of the basil, because you're probably going to have some left over, you can go ahead and either put in a Ziploc bag. I would leave it open just a little bit so that some of the moisture can get out. That way it doesn't get all kind of wet and slimy, okay? Or you can go ahead and mince it up and put it in a Ziploc so that you have it for use for later, okay? So I can see I have, quite a few leaves here. I probably have more than enough for me to make a tablespoon of basil. So I'm just gonna put this rest of my bunch to the side. I'm gonna save that for another time. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my chef's knife, okay? And I'm just going to kind of keep this into a pile. And I'm going to go through. I'm just going to kind of shred that up. All right, and I'm going to keep using my knife kind of as a scraping tool. I scrape it together and then I go back through and I keep on shredding it up. Okay. And it gets nice and fragrant. I like the smell of it. I always think it smells good. In fact, when I have it in my herb box outside, I like to every once in a while just go by and kind of take my hand and get a good whiff of it. I just like the smell of basil for whatever reason. I'm just going to keep doing that. I'm going to chop this all up. Just so that I don't have any big leaves. It doesn't have to be super, super fine. Okay? I'm just going to kind of run my knife through there. Get rid of any large pieces of leaf. So that way when somebody has their sauce, they're not getting a whole leaf like this in their sauce, right? Alright, so I have that pretty good, okay? So you see it's kind of all chopped up. Gonna go ahead and clean my knife just by scraping it here on the side, alright? Scrape it together. I'm going to put that in a bowl and I'm just going to set it to the side. So that's my basil. Clean my knife off again. Put that to the side. And now let's take a look at our mushrooms, okay? So they've already been cleaned. So I'm just gonna set my mushrooms out. You can set them out like half at a time or so, depending on how big of a cutting surface you have. So make sure you give yourself enough space to work, okay? And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go, I like to cut mine, this way, not really this way, okay? So kind of down through the stem in a way. So I'm just gonna go ahead, just gonna cut through these. Okay, so when you're cutting them, they make kind of, the mushroom shape, all right? I'm gonna go ahead and just cut all of those. Careful, watch your fingers, okay? If you need a parent or somebody to help you out, by all means, please do so if you're not comfortable handling a knife. Now, mushrooms are pretty easy to cut, okay? Here in a moment, we're going to be cutting our onion, which is a little bit more difficult, but still not too bad. And you want to make sure that you have a sharp knife, okay? Especially when you're cutting an onion. Actually, the sharper your knife, the safer that it is. And I'll kind of explain that when we get to the onion because I can explain it a little bit better, okay? So I'm just going to keep on cutting those up. So I'm going to let you go ahead, take care of your basil, and slice up your mushrooms, okay? and we'll be right back. If you feel comfortable doing so, okay, you can also use a smaller paring knife, and I'll just show you real quick. What you would do is you hold the paring knife kind of in your fingers, like so, okay? I leave this thumb free, and what I do is I push my thumb against the mushroom, and I just gently go through until it slices off, okay? You can do that right over top of the bowl that you're putting your mushrooms in, if you feel comfortable doing that. If not, then you know, use your chopping board and cut your mushrooms that way, okay? So whatever you feel comfortable with. This way is a little bit faster once you get used to it, okay? Because I can just pick a mushroom up and I just cut right through it. Okay, so that's all up to you, and that's your preference, okay? Please be careful handling your sharp knives. All right, so I've got my mushrooms all sliced up. I'm going to go ahead and add those to a bowl and place those to the side as well. So, and I know this is quite a few mushrooms, okay? They do cook down, so when they cook, they will reduce in size. But ultimately, it's up to you how many mushrooms you want to put into your sauce, okay? That's all your preference. I like to add probably just about all of them, actually. I'm going to put those to the side. All right, and then we're going to move on to our onion. All right, there's going to be two different ways I'm going to show you to do your onion, all right? So when you have an onion, you have two sides to your onion, okay? So this is your stem. This is the green part that comes out of the ground. You all know that an onion grows underground, right? So if my hand is the dirt, right, it covers the onion, and then the stem grows up from here. The other side, that kind of has the little squiggly things and has the dark end, okay? This is your root ball, okay? This is where the roots were coming down out of the onion and absorbing the nutrients and the water, okay? So, first thing we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and cut off the stem side, okay? Maybe about a 1/2 inch or so into it, okay? Enough to be able to get the top and where the stem was going into the onion, okay? So I'm going to cut that part off. So I'm using a sharp chef's knife. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my point, I'm going to push forward and push down, okay? Until it hits the bottom of my cutting mat, okay? And then I'm just going to push the rest of it through, okay? So you can see, okay, I cut off about that much of the onion, all right? And that leaves me with this much, okay? So once you've cut that off, go ahead and peel off the onion. I like to take my knife, and what I do is I just make one fine line all the way, okay, kind of down my onion. And what that will do is it helps me just to get my finger in here, okay? And you want to just peel off probably the first, couple, maybe 3 layers of the skin, okay? So I'm just going to peel this all off and discard it because the skin will stick to anything that gets wet, okay? So if you don't discard it right away, what I found out is that sometimes it will kind of get stuck to your cutting board and get into your food, and then that gives it kind of like, it's almost like a piece of paper, right? Whenever you're doing that, okay? So I've got my skin off of there, all right? So I've got my onion peeled. I am going to go ahead and take care of my peel and my top, just so like I said, it's not getting in the way and I don't have to worry about any of the little dried peel, it kind of crumbles and gets on anything else, okay? And then we'll be right back to cut our onion. Okay, so I've taken care of my area. I got my onion peel all out of the way, so I don't have to worry about that getting on anything. And I'm going to show you 2 different ways to dice your onion up, okay? The first way is a little bit more difficult, but it's the reason why we keep the root ball here, because it's going to hold our onion together. And what I'm going to do, see, I got a little bit of onion peel even on my chef's knife, okay? So I'm just gonna put that to the side. That's what I mean by sticking to things. I'm gonna not cut all the way through, but what I'm going to do is I'm gonna make kind of like a checkerboard pattern, okay? So I'm gonna cut down a little ways. You can see, so I'm cutting down a little ways into my onion. Not all the way through, I don't wanna chop this end off, okay? And I'm gonna do that so that I'm making kind of like a checkerboard, right? I'm gonna go lines this way first. And you can do this with all of your onion if you're choosing to do it this way. I'm only gonna do it with half because I wanna show you another way to do it, okay? And then, so I've gone halfway, all right? So you can see I've got my lines going one way. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn my onion and I'm gonna make lines going the other way, okay? Now this will be a little bit easier, you know, if I were doing the whole onion, because I would just do it all the way across both ways. But the reason why I'm using just the tip of my knife here is because I want to show you two different ways to do it, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm making lines, so it's making like a, you know, like a checkerboard. Those are gonna be the size of your dices, okay? So the bigger your squares, the bigger your pieces of onion. And again, you're not cutting all the way down through, okay? You're keeping it, you're gonna let that root ball at the bottom hold your onion together, okay? Now, you can see I've made the little squares, right? What I'm going to do is I'm gonna cut down into it, and what's gonna happen, as I chop that, those little dices are gonna fall right off onto my cutting board, okay? So you can see, okay, see how they're falling off there? Now, of course, I'm only doing half of my onion because I want to show you a different method for the other half, okay? Because some people are not comfortable handling the knife like that, okay? So that's one way. Let me go ahead and show you the other way, okay? The other way is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to cut the rest of this off. I'm going to cut this in half. Okay, so you have a flat surface, right? So my onion is now flat. I can set it down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make slices first. So, again, I'm going to take the point of my knife. I'm going to push down until it hits my cutting board, and then I'm going to cut, okay? Push down, chop through. Push down, chop through, okay? And the reason why earlier I was talking about having a sharper knife, right, is because if you use a dull knife, you actually stand a pretty good chance of, if I'm pushing and pushing and pushing on this onion, right here where it's getting rounded, and my knife is not sharp enough where it's cutting into it to give it that, you know, that definite line where it's going to cut down through, and I'm pushing on this, what can happen is your knife, instead of cutting, can kick sideways. So it will kick sideways like this, and if your hand is there, right, it's a way that many people get cut because they're using a knife that's too dull, and it kicks sideways on them, and they can't control it, and then it ends up cutting them, okay? So the sharper your knife, the better. All right, so I'm gonna cut most of my onion. All right, and I got a little bit too far down there, so I'm gonna cut off that little end. All right, and then once you have those slices, okay, what you're going to do, you're just going to go ahead and kind of turn those slices sideways so they're facing the other direction. I'm just going to kind of run my knife down through those slices, okay? And that's going to give you your diced up onion. Okay, once you have it diced through once, scrape them together using your chef's knife, okay, back together, and then I'm just going to run my chef's knife back through that pile. And I'm going to continue to do that until I get my onion diced up to the size where I want it. So make sure you're running it through any super large pieces, okay? Because if you're eating your sauce, you don't want to have a huge piece of onion, like a huge chunk that somebody ends up biting into, okay? Because then all they're going to taste is the onion. All right? All right, so there we go. I have them in a good size. All right, not too big of chunks. If you happen to see any big chunks, just go ahead and chop them. And then I have my dices for my other ones, so I'm just going to combine all of those. I'll slide all those over as well. All right, and then I'm going to add those to a bowl, okay? And I can see that I need to have another bowl, so I should have had 3 bowls instead of just 2. This one was the one I had my mushrooms in, so I'm going to rinse that out and I'm going to put my onions in there real quick. All right, so go ahead and do that, and we'll be right back. All right, so we're set for our next step. I've gone ahead and transferred all of my ingredients now over to where I'm going to be cooking, okay? So over to my cooking area. We're going to go ahead and open up our cans of tomato sauce and tomatoes now. Okay, so that we have that all ready when it comes time and we're over there. So I know in class in person, some people have had difficulties in the past with opening up their sauce with a can opener, okay? Which is, you know, understandable. If you've never used a can opener before, you wouldn't really know, how to do it. So I'm just going to show you real quick, okay? So when you're using your can opener, okay, you have your ends that look like this, your little spiked end at the bottom, your sharp end is at the top, okay? So you open it up, so it's, wide at the bottom. I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna put the spiked end underneath and my sharp end up at the top, okay? And then you just kind of give it a squeeze until you hear it pop, and it'll go through, the sharp end will go through the top of the lid, okay? So you'll hear it. Okay, did you hear that? That's that little click. And you can see that that sharp end is through there, okay? So now that's through there. You just keep a grip on the end of your handle, and you're just going to turn your can opener, and that spiked end will actually turn your can. Can you see how my can is turning? Okay, so that will open up the top of your tomato sauce, okay? And you're gonna go ahead and do that, go all the way around, okay? Until it goes all the way through and that you can lift your end off, okay? So that's done. And you're gonna go ahead and do the same thing with your diced tomatoes, okay? So I'm gonna clean the top of my lid off. Okay? So that I have that all ready to go. I'm gonna open up both of those cans and then take them over to my cooking area. All right, so go ahead and do that and we'll get on to the next step. Okay, so we are ready to go ahead and begin our cooking process. So I have my skillet here. I'm going to preheat my skillet. I'm going to put it on medium to high heat to start with, okay? And eventually we're going to reduce that to let all of our ingredients simmer in together. But we want to saute first. So whenever you're sauteing, it's a little bit of fat or oil, okay? High heat, and then whatever vegetables or whatever you are sauteing, okay? So I'm going to let this heat up, and I'm going to go ahead and add my olive oil. So you don't have to measure this out, just give a good drizzle across your pan. That's going to help it saute. All right, so you can see, just kind of work it around. As it heats up, it's going to become more fluid, okay? It'll go around your pan a lot easier. So you'll be able to tell when it's kind of getting hot enough to add your vegetables. You don't want to add your vegetables until it is hot, okay? You don't want to add things to a cold pan. You want to preheat it and then add your ingredients that you're sauteing, okay? And I'm going to have my spatula ready because I'm going to be, mixing it back and forth to let it saute, okay? So as soon as that's hot enough, we're going to go ahead and start sauteing. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and let mine heat up, and then we'll be right back. Okay, so you can see my oil is getting hot. It's moving around the pan, okay? Moves around a lot easier, okay? It becomes more fluid, a little bit thinner. So I'm going to go ahead, and I want to start with my vegetables that it takes a little bit longer to saute, okay? So I'm going to start off with my mushrooms and my onion, and then I'm going to add my 3 tablespoons of garlic, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and start off. I'm going to add my onion to it. You can hear it starts to sizzle as soon as I add it. Make sure you get your onion out of your bowl. Okay, so I have my onion. I'm going to add my mushrooms. Okay, and then I'm going to let those saute. So I'm going to coat them with oil. So I take my spatula, I'm going to turn it so they all get coated with oil. And I'm going to let those saute until my onions kind of start getting an opaque looking, you know, kind of opaque. They'll kind of start turning a little bit more clear. So I want to keep my heat up. So I'm actually going to turn mine up just a little bit, pretty much to high. And let it saute through, all right? Anything that comes flying out, go ahead and put it back in. Unless it lands on the floor. Then, of course, don't put it back in. So then, of course, if you're using the right kind of skillet, now it doesn't work real well with an iron skillet because the handle tends to get hot, plus it's heavy. But you can, you know, do all the fancy flipping your vegetables up like you see in the restaurant with the saute. It's a little bit too difficult to do with a cast iron skillet because it's just too heavy. So that's why I'm using the spatula. So you'll see the mushrooms will shrink. They're going to start to shrink up. The onion will turn opaque, kind of like translucent in a way. You know, you can kind of almost see through it, but not quite. You want to be careful. You don't want your onion to burn because, again, that's a very overpowering taste. You know, burnt onion, and it can mess up your sauce, okay? So I'm just going to keep making sure that I scrape the onion off of the bottom of my pan and just keep turning it until I get it to the point where I want, okay? Once they start turning opaque and my mushrooms are shrinking down and they get, you know, more tender, then I'm going to add my 3 tablespoons of garlic, okay? 3 tablespoons of garlic. So you want to make sure that you have your tablespoon all set and ready. As mine bounces into my pan, okay? So make sure you have your tablespoon all ready. If you want to make a Fra Diavolo type sauce, and I think somebody mentioned that, that might be an interest to them, you can add, and you might even take the mushrooms out, but you can add a spicy red pepper to it, okay? Or at this point, whenever we do our oregano, you can add some crushed red pepper to it as well, okay? And that will add a little bit of spice to it. I'm just going to make my plain old marinara. It's actually kind of like, let's see if I can pronounce it right. I always have a problem pronouncing it. Arrabbiata sauce? Arrabbiata? I don't know if I'm even saying it right. But, yeah, that kind of sauce. So it's got a little bit of spice to it, but it doesn't have that spicy red pepper like a Fra Diavolo, okay? I'm going to move you a little bit closer here and kind of tilt you down so you can see a little bit better, you know, about what's going on here. If I can zoom in. There we go. As you can see, it's sauteing. The onions are getting tender. The mushrooms have shrunk down, okay? That's why I add as much as I did. See how much it reduced in volume? When you, I'll bet you when I first added the mushrooms, you thought that was going to be way too much. But it reduces quite a bit. So what happens is that moisture cooks out of the mushrooms, and it causes them to shrink in size, okay? So you see, my onions are about to where I want them to be. So I can kind of show you. Don't do this at home, but you can see that they're kind of opaque, kind of lucid, right? So you kind of get a different, almost like a pearl look to them, okay? So those are about where I want them. So I'm going to go ahead and add my 3 tablespoons of garlic. I'm going to get right in there. I'm going to add, you don't have to level off or anything. I'm just going to do kind of 1. Two, and 3, okay? If you're not a garlic lover, you don't have to add quite so much. That's totally up to you. And then I'm going to mix that around, okay? Now, garlic can burn pretty easily, so you want to kind of watch it. And I'm actually going to reduce my heat a little bit now, down to about a medium, okay? Because I don't want my garlic to burn. You're going to start getting all those smells together. You'll start smelling it. It'll become very fragrant. I'm going to let that continue to saute and continue to mix it around. Okay. After a couple minutes, and when your onions have gotten completely reduced, okay, and completely, they'll get like a flimsy, and you can kind of see, you know, more of like that opaque look that I was talking about. Okay, then and the garlic is getting fragrant. I'm going to go ahead and add my diced tomatoes. So now you don't want to drain these, because especially if you're using ones that have the different flavoring, because if you drain it, you're getting rid of all that flavor. So I'm going to go ahead and add these. Okay. I'm stirring those in. I'm going to let those kind of cook and get the flavor with the onions and the mushrooms and the garlic all together. And you can hear how that kind of cooled it down. Okay. So it's no longer going to be sauteing. I'm going to heat those tomatoes up and let all those flavors mix together. Okay, and I'm going to let that sit, and I'm going to let it cook for just a couple of minutes. It doesn't take long. You want to let some of that moisture cook out and just give it a good chance for all the flavors to mix together. Okay, make sure you mix your tomatoes around so that they're not all in one place. Okay, so they're kind of mixed throughout. Okay, Okay, we've gotten those. We've let them cook for a couple minutes. All right, I'm going to go ahead and add my sauce. So I'm going to add my full can of sauce. Mix that all in together. Use your turner, get underneath there, get some of those big chunks of mushrooms and onions off of the bottom. Just let that mix all together with your sauce. Now, if I were adding these to my meatballs, I might actually make a double batch of these, because what happens is the meatballs tend to absorb some of the sauce. Okay. If you don't have enough ingredients to make your double batch and you're making meatballs now, then you can go ahead, and use this. This will be fine. I would just put it into a smaller, deeper pan, just enough to cover up the meatballs, okay? Because you want it to cover your meatballs when they're cooking. Okay. So it's all mixed together. I'm going to go ahead and add 1 tablespoon of my oregano. Okay, so I've got to rinse my tablespoon off real quick because it still has garlic on it. So go ahead and wash that real quick and dry it. Make sure you dry it or your oregano won't come out of your tablespoon because the dry leaves will stick to the tablespoon itself, okay? So washed and dried it. So I'm going to get into my oregano. Mine's about empty, so it's a little bit more difficult, but I want to get about 1 tablespoon of oregano, okay? Sprinkle that around the top. And I'm going to go ahead and add my basil. And sprinkle that around the top, okay? I probably have about 2 tablespoons of basil here. Those leaves that I got off the bunch, I just go ahead and add all of it because I like to have a lot of flavor. I love to have a flavor explosion whenever I am eating something, okay? So I'm going to mix those around in there. I'm going to reduce my heat down to a low. Okay, maybe just a little bit higher than low, between a low and a medium, so medium low. You can use your whisk here if you want to. I'm going to go ahead and just continue to use my turner, okay? Because I don't like, the large pieces of mushrooms and stuff sometimes will get caught in the whisk and to make it difficult to clean it out, okay? That mixed around in there pretty well. Once you've gotten that mixed, I'm going to go ahead and add 1/4 cup of your Parmesan cheese. I'm going to do this over my little bowl over here, just in case I happen to spill some. I want to do about 1/4 of a cup. It's a pretty good heaping one. And I'm going to add that right to my sauce. And I'm going to stir that in using my turner. Alright, so get that all mixed in there pretty well. This is your time when you can also add your crushed red pepper if you want to add some spice. And I can certainly go ahead and just take a little bit on your turner, okay? Take your finger, just take a little taste of it. See if it tastes the way you want to. This is your time that you can add a little bit of salt. If you want to add a little salt or more oregano or basil or anything like that. Okay? So mine tastes pretty good. And now I'm just going to let it sit there and I'm going to let it simmer together. Oh, probably about, I don't know. The longer you let it simmer together, you know, the more your flavors are going to kind of meld, the more flavor you're going to get out of it. But I would say at least 10 minutes. Okay? So, yeah, go ahead and let it simmer there. If you have a lid, that would be your time to go ahead and put your lid or your splash guard over top of it to keep from making a mess on your stove. And then, of course, get your noodles boiling. So a good rule could be to let it simmer until your noodles are done boiling, right? So you're going to add your hot water, your salt, your olive oil, let it get to a vigorous boil, and then add your noodles. Once your noodles are al dente, then your sauce, you figure, has simmered, okay? If you're going to make meatballs using this, right, I would add it to a baking dish, okay, that's deep enough to hold your meatballs and your sauce. Once you let this simmer for about 10 minutes, carefully either take a ladle or a spoon, a large spoon, scoop it out into your meatballs, or, you know, dump it if you have a parent to maybe help you or whatever, over top of your meatballs. The key is you want to cover them up. Take your meatballs, cover your whole pan with some aluminum foil, and place it in your oven. And I like to let them cook for at least an hour at about 350 degrees, okay? That'll let your meatballs get nice and tender. It lets them absorb all the sauce, and it'll have a nice flavor. All right? So that is your arrabbiata or marinara sauce. All right? So I hope that you enjoy it. Let me know how it turns out. All right. Manja.